This week's show is supported by True Leaf Market, the indoor and outdoor growing experts. And I'm really grateful to True Leaf Market, who will be popping up every week for the next 3 months as one of our show sponsors. Use coupon code ONTHELEDGE to get 10% off your first purchase at trueleafmarket.com. True Leaf Market has everything you need to get started with growing food indoors, including a microgreen starter kit for mess-free hydroponic growing and an incredible range of non-GMO seeds. True Leaf Market has everything you need to get started with growing food indoors, including a microgreen starter kit for mess-free hydroponic growing and an incredible range of non-GMO seeds for microgreens or sprouting, including wasabi mustard and Thai basil. They also stock an extensive range of veg and flower seeds for your indoor and outdoor growing projects. And if you have problems with your dog or cat eating your houseplants, True Leaf Market's dog and cat pet grass kit should give them something more nutritious and safer to munch on. So go and check out trueleafmarket.com now, and don't forget to use the coupon code ONTHELEDGE to get 10% off your first purchase. Bringing you foliage, flowers and fun since February 2017, this is On The Ledge podcast. This week I'll be talking about growing herbs indoors with a young YouTuber who has taken the gardening world by storm. I'll also be answering a question about a rare climbing plant for terrariums and sowing my Sarracenia purpurea seeds. I do hope you've had a productive couple of weeks and a great Easter. Thanks to those of you who joined me for my Facebook Live over the Easter period. I had a bit of trouble with technology. My computer refused to let me use the camera and microphone for a bit, but after half an hour of scrabbling about, we managed to make it work. So thanks to those of you who bore with me for that. And we had a great fun for an hour chatting about all sorts of things. There were a few questions that I didn't manage to answer, either because my brain just seized up and I couldn't remember the answer or couldn't remember the plant, and I'll be trying to cover those in the next couple of episodes, including today's Q&A. But it was lovely to see so many of you joining in and getting the chance to have a little peek inside my home and see some of my houseplants. So thanks so much for joining me. That was, of course, in celebration of reaching 100 patrons, and I've now smashed through that target, and I'm hopefully on my way to my new target of 200 patrons. And the new patrons who've joined since my last show are Frank, who joined the $10 tier to become an On The Ledge superfan. Ezra, who's also signed up as an On The Ledge superfan, getting the chance to become part of the On The Ledge special advisory board for listeners. And Eleanor and Linby, who have both joined the $5 tier. Oh, and Starlight Botanist has upgraded to the $10 tier. So thank you all for putting your faith in On The Ledge. One of the questions that came up during the Facebook Live was, you're always quoting the figures in dollars. Does that mean you have to be in the US to contribute to Patreon? And the answer to that is quite simply no. You can contribute via any currency whatsoever. You'll just get your figure translated into your own currency, and you can pay via PayPal or via your credit card. Several people have said they found it surprisingly easy, so don't be intimidated. If you're able to give just $1, that would help enormously to support the show. And remember, if you give that $5, then you get extra content, which I do put a lot of work into, so it's definitely worth checking out if you find that you're missing On The Ledge in between episodes, and of course when we take little breaks, as we've just done. Wolfie was getting a lot of love after appearing in episode 89, and I put a picture of him on Instagram as well. Wolfie is my hairy hound, and I will put out a tiny little bonus episode, just 5 minutes long, about Wolfie, which if you're into dogs, you might want to listen to, or if you're not, you can just skip. But you can find out more about Wolfie in that little mini episode coming up soon. Somebody also has helped me out with the answer to the question that was in my Apple Podcast review, strangely enough, about hardy spider plants. Thank you so much to Anna Dickey. She told me that the seller was Van Mewen, who are a plant seller here in the UK, who are offering Chlorophytum saundersii starlight, which is being sold as anthericum or the hardy spider plant. This apparently can be grown outdoors all year round with elegant variegated foliage and starry white flowers. Yes, it does look very similar to the housebound chlorophytum. And it says it's ideal for containers and mixed borders. So this is an interesting one. You can buy this relative of Chlorophytum comosum, same genus, different species by the look of it, and grow it outside. Of course, you can grow your spider plants of the Chlorophytum comosum type outside too, but you have to bring them in before the frost, so they won't get, because they just won't like being frosted. But this one seems to be a tougher proposition, so definitely worth a look if you want to expand your spider plant collection further. And thanks again to Starlight Botanist, who also left me a lovely review on Apple Podcasts and called the show the best houseplant podcast hands down. Ooh, that's nice. Thanks, Starlight Botanist. Although she does say you can always learn something fun and interesting, and for better or worse, discover a new and wonderful plant or two. Yes, it does have a habit of doing that, this show, doesn't it? Costing you money. I apologise in advance. Thanks also to T4SCH, who left a review on the UK version of Apple Podcasts, in which he or she called the podcast, all in all, a lovely thing. Well, that's kind of what I'm aiming for around here, so that's great to hear. If you like plants that are multi-purpose, then herbs are a really fantastic thing to grow in the house. My interview today is with Huw Richards. The Guardian called him the new kid in the herbaceous border. Bit inaccurate, Guardian, because actually he's more likely to be in the veg bed than the herbaceous border. But anyway, Huw Richards is definitely somebody to look out for when it comes to finding out how to grow veg. But, you know, we're an indoor show, so I'm not talking to Huw about allotments or outside, although a little bit of that does creep into this episode. But I wanted to know his tips for growing herbs indoors. So we go a little bit mad for mint, we find out what ollas are, and Huw talks about an amazing compost made from sheep's wool and bracken.
So my name's Huw Richards, and I started growing when I was about 3, and I'm now 20, and I'm possibly most well known for my YouTube channel, which just teaches people how they can grow their own food, no matter what scale that they have at home.
Huw, I don't know when I first came across you. I think it was probably when your YouTube channel blew up and you were in the Guardian's Pass Notes, or whatever they call it, the
Yes.
EG2. And I remember seeing that and thinking, oh, hang on, he's suddenly hitting the big time. Was that a moment where things just blew up for you and your YouTube channel went crazy?
It was quite unbelievable. It was just over a year ago, actually, and my story got picked up first in the Western Mail, and then it was the Times, the Mail, and the Guardian, and then the Guardian Weekend. And there was just this moment of constant emails and phone calls from people all over the country with different opportunities. I had like 3 or 4 publishers contact me. I had loads of agencies, 6 different TV production companies. It was all a bit shocking, to be honest.
Well, when did gardening get so popular? This is, it's great to see you as a guy of 20 promoting gardening and doing excellent stuff on your YouTube channel. That's very inspirational. I know a lot of my audience are in their 20s and absolutely love gardening and are really into it and are sort of defying the perhaps stereotype of older people that younger people aren't really into gardening. So you started off when you were 3. Was it a sort of a family hobby that everyone got involved in? Was that how you got started?
Yeah, so we moved actually when I was about 9 months old from Yorkshire. We moved to Midwest Wales, just about half an hour inland from Aberystwyth, because my parents were always inspired by things like John Seymour's book of self-sufficiency and like the TV show The Good Life. And they thought,
Aww.
Tell you what, let's move, let's get a small holding and just be a bit more self-sufficient. So ever since I can remember, and I've got a terrible memory anyway, but looking back, they just got me involved with everything. And I'm really grateful actually, because as I grew up I kind of learned about the true story of food, where it comes from, and also how to grow things and how to care for plants. And a lot of kids really miss out with that experience.
Yeah, that's very true. And so it was obviously in your blood and you were exposed to it really early, which is great. So you're really known for your veg growing exploits, and in fact your new book Veg in One Bed is sitting in front of me. It's rather lovely. So this is all about how to grow lots of food in one raised bed month by month, which is great. And I, as somebody who has raised beds, I shall be leafing through and getting some inspiration. But On the Ledge is about indoor gardening, so we're really here to chat about some things that we can do indoors. I know that sometimes I don't do a huge amount of stuff on edible things you can grow indoors, so I'm hoping to correct that this week by having a chat with you about some of the things you can get up to indoors. I said to you, I think when we had our pre-interview chat, about getting a bit sniffy about people trying to grow lavender indoors, and you sort of said, well, why not grow lavender indoors? So let's just talk about some of the herbs that you can grow indoors and what works and what doesn't work. What are the key plants that can work as herbs indoors?
Firstly, I'd go for the annuals, definitely. And although technically things like parsley are a biennial, on the second year they actually send out flowers and aren't as productive. So what I do is sow a new crop every, say, February or March, just so you can get good harvest. So things that I find are more of the leafy greens kind of herbs. So basil, mint, coriander, parsley, those will grow really well. And they need a little less care, because when you then come on to things like rosemary and lavender, it can get a bit more difficult and a bit more complicated. So for me, I feel if someone is just starting off and they've got a windowsill or something and they want to grow some herbs, then I would definitely go for something like basil or parsley.
That's great. And I think basil is great because there are some really, really beautiful cultivars out there of basil, which look really, I mean, they could stand in as a kind of an attractive foliage plant. I'm thinking of some of those kind of purple leaved ones, which are really, really stunning. So when you're coming to sow your seeds, well, what's the basic procedure with that? We've been doing a lot of seed sowing here on the Ledge for our On the Ledge sow along, but is sowing something like basil or parsley any different than, say, sowing coleus like we've been talking about?
So sowing, especially though the ones that I mentioned, the kind of the leafy green kind of herbs, they all follow a very similar process in terms of sowing. So I'd say start in February, and also sow them in the pot you want to harvest them from. I think that's really important. So in terms of pot diameter, make sure that it's at least about 4 to 5 inches wide, so about 10 centimeters. If you can get bigger, obviously that is going to be a bit of a benefit for you. But what I do is sow them about 1/4 of an inch deep, so 1/2 centimeter, and use a potting mix, because potting mixes are made specifically to grow in pots. You know, the clue's in the name. So I'd also try and recommend to use peat-free as well. And if you want to try something new, there's this new compost company that's had a lot of publicity. I'm sure you've heard of them. Dalefoot Compost. Have you heard of them?
I have, yes. I've used their compost many times.
Yeah, so they make, for those of you listening who don't know, they make compost primarily out of sheep's wool and bracken. And it's this amazing combination, which I don't know how they would have thought up that, but it was just using it. I've never had such a soft compost, but I found the moisture retention of it really, really good for the pot. So I've actually got little containers outside of strawberries growing in that compost. And even though we've had lots of warm weather recently, within the first centimetre or two, there's still moisture. So that's something that's worth having a look at. And then what I do is, once you've sown them, so cover them with 1/2 centimetre of the potting mix, and then keep them in a warm spot, because this does help promote germination. And especially if you're starting in February, it's still quite cool. And if you're growing on a windowsill, and we can come back to looking at different types of windowsills and what the best are, because they're so close to the outside, they're quite cool. So if you have an airing cupboard, or something like a radiator or something, putting the pots on top of here is just going to speed up the germination. And another thing I like to do is, so you don't worry about evaporation, is cut out a little cardboard kind of circle which will fit over the top of the pot, put that over, and then every day or so just check for sprouts. And as soon as you see those little seedlings emerge, then move them to a place with a lot of light to stop them becoming leggy.
That is the enemy of sowing seeds indoors, isn't it? That problem with legginess. I mean, you can get a lot of these elaborate kind of pieces of kit now that sort of combine a grow light with a seed sowing kit. I mean, I'm a bit of a miser, as regular listeners will know, and I don't like spending money. I guess some of these can work provided that you're prepared to buy a bit of kit that you're going to use year after year. Those LED grow lights can really help with the problem of seedlings getting too spindly.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is that there's a huge range, so you can go right for the kind of beginner range all the way to really advanced. But the other thing is that some people aren't going to have a south-facing windowsill, because ideally you need at least 6 hours of sunlight a day for growing herbs indoors. So if you don't have that, or you don't have an east-facing, which is the second best option, then I would then say look at any kind of LED grow light. And even if you're just getting started, I feel there's no harm in getting something, maybe it's a bit naff and cheap, but what you're doing is actually you're building your experience through that, and then you can then choose which direction you want to take.
That's interesting that you're recommending keeping the seedlings in the same pot, and then presumably if you're a bit heavy-handed with the sowing, you might need to thin out some of those seedlings if you've got too many in the pot.
Actually, I'm not a huge advocate of thinning out, especially things like if I'm growing outdoors lettuce or something. I never thin that because of the way I harvest them. And I think it's the same for herbs. Just make sure that you don't have more than, say, 3 to 5 seedlings in a pot, but kind of sow them central, and they're going to grow a really kind of bushy stem, and they'll grow out and you can harvest a lot more. So don't be afraid. And another thing that I encourage people to do is to experiment and try different things. So why don't you compare the growth between a pot of 3 or 4 parsley plants versus a pot of just 1 plant, and then you can work out yourself which is best for you.
That's great advice. And, we're talking about sowing in February. It's now April. If anyone's listening to this straight away as it comes out, they may be thinking, oh no, I've missed the boat. Is there a case that you can say, well, I'll just catch up?
Yeah, that's the great thing about gardening indoors, is that you don't have to worry about frosts. And even though during the winter, unless you do have some kind of supplemental lighting, they're not going to grow as fast, but you're still going to get fresh harvests on your windowsill. And that's something quite amazing, especially if you're in a lot colder climate as well.
Let's just talk about a few lazy cheats here. People do buy herbs from the supermarket in pots, which, I try to avoid this because it feels like most of the time it's unnecessary for me personally, but so it happens. Is there anything we can do to prolong the life of those supermarket potted herbs, or even finding some way of keeping them going over the whole of the year, as opposed to just chopping them off and then consigning them to the compost heap?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of buying herbs from supermarkets to grow in pots. I've done that before, and I somehow feel that there's either a curse on me, or it's just this shared curse where they always seem to die on you really quickly. And they're like, I'm really trying to look after you, but they just seem to give up. So if you do want to cheat, I would say a better option is to go to a garden centre you like or trust or know has good quality, because the quality of the actual production and growing is I feel going to be a lot better than in a supermarket. So that's the first thing that I would say. Now, if you are going to get herbs from a supermarket, the first thing that I would do is I would actually pot them up into a slightly bigger pot and use some fresh potting compost with that, and then be very cautious with the watering. Try not to overwater them, because I always feel whenever I buy herbs from a shop people might have different experiences, but for me, I feel the compost and it's pretty wet. I wouldn't call it moist. It's pretty wet, and one of the things that is a huge problem of growing herbs indoors is that when you have a lot of moisture in the roots and in pots and they're kind of crammed in there, the roots then begin to rot. So something that you could try is like a little cheat, or not really a cheat, but more of a hack, is to use terracotta pots, because just make sure that they're not glazed inside or outside, because these are porous. So if you grow outside, you might have heard of these things called olars, or however you pronounce them, and they give this really slow release of moisture into the soil. So what you can do is, if you grow things in terracotta pots indoors, the clay helps lose that moisture from the soil, that excess moisture, and will reduce the risk of root rot.
Tell me the name of that thing again.
Ola, I think it's spelt O-double-L-A, or Ola.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how you pronounce it either, but I have seen these. Yes. I really want to give this a try in the garden where you've got this terracotta. I think the traditional ones are shaped like,
yes,
well, like a wine decanter or something. So they've got a narrow neck, but I think you can do it just with a regular, a regular terracotta pot, can't you? Yeah, I really want to give that a go, because I've got 2 raised beds. I mean, really, retrospectively, I probably shouldn't have put these raised beds in, because I have a very free draining soil. They don't really help my raised beds, but I think if I added some olives, maybe I'd be better at growing some more thirsty crops there. So yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I know you can also do this on a really small scale with mixed plantings inside as well, if you use a tiny pot, if you're going away. That is a good tip. I don't know how to pronounce it though. Is it Ola? I couldn't tell you.
I don't know, but one thing I would say in terms of if you do want to use them outside when growing herbs, is to kind of grow a clump of herbs around, or say transplant them after you've put the Ola pot in, because they're actually quite big, and it's not suitable for rows of crops. It's suitable for a nice concentrated circular area.
Well, that's okay, because I never sow anything in rows.
There we go.
I am a sprinkler. I'm one of life's sprinklers. I'm not a orderly row kind of person. Even when I had an allotment, I was always a bit freestyle. So that sounds perfect for me. We'll be back with more herb chat with Huw shortly, but now it's time for Question of the Week, which comes from Ashley, who has a problem with a bamboo plant. Although actually, looking at the photos, Ashley, I think your plant is much more likely to be a Dracaena than a bamboo. Although I can understand why you've got the two mixed up, because Dracaenas do have that trunk which does bear a passing resemblance to bamboo. So I think you have a Dracaena, and the problem you've got is that your golden retriever has taken an experimental bite on the shoots. Oh dear, naughty pooch. And now her poor Boo, this is the name for her bamboo plant, I think you might need to change that, Ashley, is getting brown. She's repotted, and in fact leaves are starting to turn yellow. So this doesn't sound great. Mechanical damage from the teeth of a pooch should not cause leaves to go brown. The plant may go into a bit of shock, but you know what? Dracaenas are incredibly tough plants. And usually, if they're chomped on, they will just regrow, provided they're happy in their conditions. Which leads me to think that perhaps this plant wasn't happy in the first place, Ashley. I suspect that there may be an issue with overwatering. The yellow leaves are often a sign of overwatering if there's a lot of them. 1 or 2 yellowing leaves is fairly normal for most plants. Leaves don't last forever. They tend to be lost and they will go yellow before they fall. But if lots of leaves are going yellow, often that can be a sign of overwatering. Now, Dracaenas, they can stand an awful lot of neglect, which is why they are enduringly popular houseplants. I have a Dracaena marginata. You may have seen it on the Facebook Live the other day. I'm going to try air layering it for the Patreon episode, which could be fun. But for the moment, it's a very spindly but healthy Dracaena marginata, many years old, actually belongs to my other half. And I just chuck a mug of water on that every now and again, and it's absolutely fine. So they don't need fussing about watering every 5 minutes or so. So I would say, Ashley, it's good that you've repotted, and perhaps the plant's just recovering from the shock of being repotted and the shock of your pooch eating it, and just keep off the water and see what happens. On the other hand, if the leaf tips go brown, it probably means your plant isn't getting enough water. So again, there's a careful balance here. So Ashley doesn't say whether, she just says getting brown. She doesn't say whether it's tips or spots or what. But as I say, I suspect that this plant just needs less water. One other thing worth mentioning, if you didn't know, is that Dracaenas are quite sensitive to fluoride in water. So if you live in an area with a fluoridated water system, it is definitely worth looking at watering your Dracaena with either distilled water or rainwater to get around this problem. If they are suffering from a fluoride overdose, you'll see some brown marks on the leaves. Depends on exactly which Dracaena you've got as to how that will manifest. But if you're doing everything else right and your Dracaena still isn't happy, fluoride is definitely something to have a look at. Ashley, let me know how you're getting on with this plant. I'm sorry it's taken me a while to answer your question, but I suspect that your Dracaena will be fine. You've repotted it, just ease off on that water. If you're worried about the roots and whether you have overwatered, take it out of the pot again and look at those roots and see what's going on. Check that they're nice, white and firm. And I don't know what to suggest with your golden retriever other than maybe find him some other way to keep his brain busy. But I'm sure as soon as he looks at you with this little squishy face that all is forgiven. If you've got a question for On The Ledge Podcast, drop me an email. ontheledgepodcast@gmail.com. And if you can, please include a picture and lots of information about where your plant is sited, how long you've had it and what's been happening, so I can do my best to really give you accurate information. And now back to my chat with Huw, and I wanted to find out what you can do when you've got one of those soggy supermarket herb pots. Can you add anything to it to sort out the waterlogging, or is it just best repotted?
Yeah, I would definitely stick to just repotting it. It's the most simple thing to do. I actually find it really satisfying potting on plants. Another thing that you could do is try putting it on a radiator, or if there's a really sunny day and it's nice and warm outside, leave that pot outside, and that will really help reduce excess moisture. And actually something which is really important as well is, yes, I mentioned about having to use or using terracotta pots to help reduce that moisture. But one of the things, especially if you're growing on windowsills, you want to make sure that the pots have drainage holes, as with everything. However, you don't want any soil or compost or water to drain actually onto your windowsill and leave those stains. So if you're using a saucer underneath, make sure it isn't a clay saucer, or if it is, glaze it. Otherwise, it might look really nice and authentic, but it's still going to let moisture through. So that's just a really quick tip to bear in mind.
Yeah, that is a good tip because, I've ruined quite a few pieces of furniture with pots over the years.
As long as it's your own furniture.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. And I find that that is a really good tip. And I also sometimes use, in addition to that, I've got some slate coasters which I put underneath, because even when you've got a glaze thing, sometimes the sort of dampness can sort of permeate through if it's onto wood or something. So I tend to have several layers of protection on things that I really care about.
Something I really like is if you do want to look for quite cool sources or something, is I like to use side plates and pick them up from either a thrift shop or a charity shop or something like that. You can get them really cheaply, but you can get really cool designs. So if you're looking for some kind of source of inspiration, then I would go look at your local secondhand stores.
Great. And is there any hope for anybody who says, well, look, I've got a west-facing windowsill, I really don't want to buy grow lights? And is there anything edible that people with a bit less light can go for without having to invest in grow lights, or are grow lights really a necessity if you're in a lower light situation for edibles indoors?
I would say then if you are lacking light, you need to look a bit more towards the microgreen side of things, because usually when you harvest those, they're actually still growing from the energy from the seed rather than having to photosynthesize. So something that I really think works well, things like pea shoots. Those are fantastic. Or you can look at other microgreens or things like cress, anything like that. In terms of herbs, they are going to struggle a bit, but I think there'll be some, in terms of the best possible chance, I'd probably look at trying to grow something like mint, like an apple mint or something, and just see how it goes. But I would say if you don't try, you don't know what's going to happen. And even though it might be really disastrous if you lose a plant, at least you've given it a go, because the best thing that can happen is you find out that you can actually grow something on that windowsill.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you mentioned mint, because I think this is my all-time favourite herb, and I have got quite a few different varieties of mint, which is all in my garden, but I do sometimes bring a pot in over the winter. I don't know how many mints you grow, Huw, but I've had more in the past than I've got now, but I think I've probably got at least half a dozen. And one of my favourites is mojito mint, which is designed specifically for putting in mojitos, which is rather nice.
Lovely.
And one I have, which I've never seen anywhere else, and I can't tell you where I got it from because it's top secret. What can I say? But I have got some lavender mint, which genuinely, when you crush the leaves, smells of lavender.
Wow.
Which is really interesting.
Can I grab some cuttings?
Yeah, no, seriously, I'll send you some. I'll send you some lavender mint. It's really awesome.
We have chocolate mint, which is
yes, I love
cool.
that too.
But I think there's about 600 different cultivars of
600
of mint in the Memphis family. Yeah, so I think you need to add to your collection.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to. And in fact, I'll put a link in the show notes to a place that I tend to get a lot of my mints from, which is called Plants with Purpose. And they're a little mail order nursery in I think they're in Scotland. And they always have lots of really weird mints that I tend to like to buy. So I'll include a link to that. And the wonderful thing about having those mints in the kitchen is obviously it's very easy then to go and make your fresh mint tea and just grab some leaves off, which is fantastic. And I think if you ever need a mood boost, just squeezing some mint, crushing some mint between your fingers and having a sniff. I think that's a wonderful thing. Perhaps it's just me.
No, I can completely see that. It's what I like to do is make a herbal tea. I think lemon balm is something else that you could try as well. But another benefit of growing these things is that they add a really nice fragrance indoors as well. I feel like they're almost a natural filter, giving you a nice fragrance of air, especially if you just rub a couple of leaves every now and then. You just every so often get this little whiff of mint or something else that I really like is basil as well. So I think another way of looking at it is, yes, it might not be extremely productive, especially if you don't have lots of sun or whatever, but you then also have the fragrance side, and also you have a bit of greenery indoors, which is always going to be a benefit.
You know, as you say, it might not be a permanent plant, but it might come in for a few weeks at a time and then go back outside.
No pun intended.
Yeah, indeed.
Time is another one.
Indeed. I'm just looking out my office window at a huge clump of thyme, which I don't know, it's tripled in size. I don't know what's happened there. It's got huge. Thyme is another wonderful one. But just going back to mint, the wonderful thing about mint is you can just take a section of stem, of that square-shaped stem, and it roots so easily, doesn't it? So it really is a very...
You can root it in water.
I was going to say, I haven't rooted mint in water, but I'm sure it does root very easily. And you mentioned lemon balm. I think people often get mixed up between lemon verbena and lemon balm. They're two different things.
Yeah.
Two different species of plants, but they both offer a kind of a lemony hit. I guess you could grow lemon verbena indoors as well. I've not tried it, but I guess that would work as a temporary plant, but probably would need a lot of sun.
Yeah, I haven't had any experience trying to grow that either inside.
But that's my ultimate... the smell of those leaves that's just like crack cocaine to me. The smell of lemon verbena leaves I could just sniff all day. Yeah. Okay, I'm starting to sound like a weirdo now, but it makes me despair when you see people buy, plug-in air fresheners. It's like, just open the window and get some herbs inside. That's all you need to do to make your life much, much better.
I also feel that what's important with things like growing lemon balm or mint is when you're looking at the actual size of the container, they actually prefer something that's wider than depth. I think width in terms of their roots, because they're quite shallow rooted, is a lot more important than depth. So if you've actually got a windowsill and you can add a window box onto it, that's going to be perfect to grow things like mint and a bit of lemon balm.
Oh, that's really interesting, because that's very true, actually. Yeah, you do tend to find... I've just been repotting some mint in the garden, actually, and the roots tend to, after a season, tend to start circling around, don't they? They don't go that deep, so that's a really good point.
Another thing, when you're repotting something, especially when you're repotting something like a perennial, like rosemary or something, if the roots are kind of, as you described, going around the side, something that you can actually do is prune off the roots. Not all of them, but give the roots a prune, and that's just going to help contain the roots within the pot, make them not root bound, and it also helps control the size of the plant. So that's another thing that I would recommend.
Brilliant. Well, that's a load of top tips there for people to put into action. But I want to know, Huw, you're obviously a food growing man, but do you have any non-edible houseplants, or is that just not your scene?
It isn't really my scene. We actually live in it's a 300-year-old Welsh cottage, and the walls are over half a metre thick, and the windows are fairly small, so we're kind of limited. So at the moment on my windowsills, I've got things like all the squash and tomato seedlings coming through. But in the past, yes, I've grown things like geraniums or pelargoniums. Those are fun, but I kind of got fed up of the smell. Those aren't the best in terms of scent, in my opinion.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that's a divider, that one. Some people love the smell, some people hate it.
To me, it smells just like metal. I don't know. But then when I was younger, I was fascinated about trying to grow things from supermarkets. So if I could get a mango seed to grow or avocado seeds to grow, or I was even successful growing kiwis from seed, not actual harvestable kiwis, but propagating the plants, and they grew about a foot tall and had these amazing furry leaves. So I always, in my bedroom, I'm fortunate to have 2 windowsills. And because it's an old house, one of the benefits is actually they're quite deep. So they're about 40 centimeters deep. So I've got a lot of space, even though they're not super wide or tall. I've got a lot of space to play with. So when I was younger, my windowsills in my bedroom would just be full of crazy experiments of trying to grow apple seeds, lemon seeds, all those kind of things.
I need to tick 2 things off the list of things that people like you and I who are obsessed with plants as children grow. Did you grow carrot tops? That's one that I always used to. Did you cut off the top of a carrot, grow that? And did you grow a pineapple top? Those are the ones I always think of as being very...
I tried. I haven't been successful with a pineapple top yet.
It's actually harder than it looks. I mean, I'm trying to think back, and I've definitely tried it. I don't know if I ever succeeded with the pineapple. I certainly grew a lot of carrot tops over the years, but that's all back in now. I see that all over Pinterest. People, cutting, getting the bases of celery and trying to regrow things like that, regrowing garlic and things like that. So it's very in vogue, isn't it? Again, to do all that stuff.
It does actually frustrate me a bit seeing all of this, because they kind of give you this promise that you're going to get a harvest from it. That's how I feel, that there's a lot of it, like, grow your own food at home. Here's how you grow carrots from a carrot top. And I'm like, yeah, you're just going to get some leaves.
There's a lot of bad advice out there, isn't there? Because, of course, as you say, you're not going to eat. I mean, the most basic grasp of botany will tell you you're not going to get a new carrot out of that carrot top.
Exactly.
But I think it's a nice thing to experiment with. And even if you do try it, like you're gonna be on a steep learning curve, but you will learn about plants by doing that. And I guess that's the best way.
So something which will work is actually if you're cutting up onions and you save maybe a top inch or two, so top 2 to 4 centimeters, and put that in water, it might send up some green shoots, which you can use like a spring onion. Right. So there's one thing which you could try. Okay.
Well, anything that you can do that gets you into contact with plants and experimenting can only be a good thing. Well, it's been really nice to talk to you, Huw. Thanks so much for joining me today, and happy growing.
And you too. Thank you so much.
To find out more about Huw and everything he does, check out janeperrone.com, where you'll find the show notes of this episode, including details of Huw's YouTube channel and his new book, Veg in One Bed. And before we go, I just wanted to bring you a little bit of an On the Ledge Sow-Along extra. I sowed my Sarracenia purpurea seeds this week, and it was such an interesting process involving all kinds of things like washing up liquid and cold stratification that I thought you might like to come along and hear what I got up to. I haven't yet sown my Sarracenia purpurea seeds, so I thought I'd stick the recorder on while I do this so you can see how this works, because this is the perfect example of how some seeds have a seed coat that needs special attention to soften it up and get it ready to germinate. So these come from Chiltern Seeds, and I'm just going to follow the instructions on the packet. I'm opening up in one of these little, are they called glassine? Glassine, is that right? These little opaque paper envelopes, and pouring the seed into a small shot glass. And I'm just going to follow the instructions on here. So we've got to soak the seeds in warm purified water or rainwater with a tiny spot of washing up liquid, which should help break down the waxy coating. So let's get some washing up liquid and give this a go. I'm going to have to try and do a tiny spot of it, which I will do like that. And now I need to go and get some rainwater. Come with me to the garden, if you will. I've got a number of rainwater butts out here, which I can use to get a little bit of water. They're rather empty at the moment because it's been so dry here, and I'll have to go round to get to this one. Okay, the water's gone in. And the seeds are now sitting there. I shall put this somewhere high so nobody accidentally drinks it. But this is part one, soaking the seeds. Join me again once the seeds have soaked. I'm not sure how long to leave them. I think I'm going to leave them overnight and see how they do. See you soon. Oh, well, it's a very chilly morning, and I've come outside because it's time to sow my Sarracenia purpurea seeds, which have been soaking overnight. Oh, there's a bit of frost on the lawn. Oh, Wolfie. Wolfie's wearing his leopard print PJs and looking very stylish this morning. Okay, to the potting shed. It's a chilly one today. It's chilly, Wolf. Wolfie, you're going to have to come in here, otherwise you're going to get too cold. You coming in? Can you come? Bit crowded in here because I've got lots of herbs that I'm growing for a herb garden open day. So, okay, so I've got my purpurea seeds which have been soaking overnight, and the rest of the instructions tell me that I've got to put these in some moist, well-drained sphagnum moss or soil and place the whole pot in a polythene bag and cold stratify. Let's start off by getting some of the right compost first, and I've got to have a dig around for it. I've got some specialist carnivorous plant compost here, which I'm going to use for this job. There aren't many seeds, so I'm actually going to put these in quite a small pot because there aren't enough room to really put them into a seed tray. Wolfie's standing here looking very aggrieved at the fact that it's chilly. Right, you'll just have to put up with it, Wolf, I'm afraid. Okay, I found a suitable pot. When you're potting things up that need to go in the fridge, you do need to bear in mind, size-wise, what's going to fit in your fridge. So as you know, carnivorous plants don't like tap water, so they need to be watered with rainwater normally, but I wouldn't normally use rainwater for seed sowing though, because that can introduce problems with damping off, which is a fungal condition. So in this case I'm going to use distilled water, because that is pure, but it also doesn't contain the mineral salts that will cause a problem to the plants. So I'm going to take my seeds. I'm not quite sure how to get them out of this water and onto the soil. I'm just going to give them a little bit of a drain and then pick out the rest of the seeds as carefully as I can and let them go onto the surface of the compost. Don't want to lose any because I haven't got that many. There they are, they're all coming out now. So they've been in this water with a tiny drop of washing up liquid, which is going to break down that seed coat and get them to germinate. I think that's all of them. So cold stratification, this means that the seeds need a period of cold in order to germinate. So they won't germinate unless, if they're stuck in a room temperature room, because they need that cold period to tell the seed that it's time to start germinating. So these are going to go into a plastic bag, into the fridge, and sit there for quite some time. What does it say? 4 to 8 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to put a reminder on my phone that I need to check them in a couple of weeks' time, and then check them again 2 weeks after that to see how we're doing. And at that point, they will then go to a bright windowsill to germinate at around 20 to 24 degrees centigrade. It says that germination takes 1 to 3 months and can be erratic. Oh, I hate it when it says it can be erratic, because that drives me crazy. But anyway, we'll just have to be patient, won't we? And then we need to transplant the seedlings when they've got 5 true leaves. Okay, so these are looking good. I'm going to write a label because I'm being good this year in writing labels. So Sarracenia purpurea and the date. And wish me luck. We'll see what happens with these. I rather fancy having a nice load of Sarracenias catching flies in the next few years. Right, I don't know where Wolfie's gone. He's standing in a sunspot, no doubt, sunning himself, as is his wont. It's very early on a Sunday morning here, so quietly having a look around my potting shed while I'm out here. It's good to see that the plants that I accidentally left out, despite the fact it was a really cold night, my new seed and burrito, dear, shouldn't really have been left out, but it seems to be okay. So I've dodged a bullet there. And my sundews that I was telling you about previously, they're really looking very adorable now with these tiny tentacles covering the leaves, catching flies before long, no doubt. So that's it. That wraps up Sarracenia sown for now. I will report back when I have some progress. Right, I'm off to give Wolfie his breakfast. Bye. I'm not sure I made it quite clear in that audio that the surface sowing of Sarracenias is important. So surface sow just means sow them on the surface. Don't add any soil on top, which is exactly what I did for those Sarracenias. They need light to germinate. So if you see surface sow, that's what it means. Do remember to keep me up to date with all your OTL sowalong activities using the hashtag OTL sowalong in your tweets, Instagram posts and Facebook posts. And if you want to contribute to Houseplant Fans of On The Ledge, you can click on the topics button to add the OTL sowalong topic to your post, which makes it really easy for everyone to find your stuff. That's all for this week's show. I'll be back next week with episode 92. And in the meantime, whatever you're sowing, repotting or propagating, have a fabulous week. Bye. The music you heard in this week's episode was Roll Jordan Roll by the Joy Drops, An Instrument the Boy Called Happy Day Dracaena by Samuel Corwin, and Water in the Creek by Josh Woodward, with ad music by the Heftone Banjo Orchestra playing Dill Pickles. All licensed under Creative Commons. See janeperrone.com for details.